There was a woman called Sachi living one floor below me. At first, we would just politely say hello to each other whenever we crossed paths at the entrance of our apartment complex, but one weekend we bumped into each other at a nearby park. I was there with my daughter Lisa, who's in kindergarten, and Sachi was taking a walk with her husband. She came over to say hello and we got to talking. After this, we began hanging out more often, going out for lunch on weekdays, and hanging out at each other's apartment from time to time. She was around the same age as me, so we had a lot to talk about, and I always enjoyed her company. But unfortunately, as our friendship was becoming stronger, they suddenly had to move out due to her husband's work. On the day of her departure, she came to see me to say goodbye. She brought me some sweets and a present for Lisa. She said, "Thank you so much for everything. I had so much fun with you. Take this, it's for Lisa. I hope she likes it." There was a stuffed bunny toy inside. Sachi remembered Lisa taking a liking to it when she saw it perched next to the window during one of our visits. Lisa and I thanked her as she hugged the bunny with its comical, dazed expression tight to her chest. It was a week or so after Sachi left that it began. Lisa began to hurt herself. She would scratch her arms and legs until it bled and slap her own face. And on bad days, she would slam her head against the wall or the floor. No matter how many times I told her to stop or asked why she was doing these things, she would continue and never give me an answer. After a while, I began getting worried calls from her kindergarten teacher because Lisa was now doing it not just within the walls of our home, but outside too. I can still clearly remember her eyes brimming with hatred when she was hurting herself. Soon after, there was another change. She would run into my room in the middle of the night crying. Like any other child, she did sometimes have nightmares, maybe once a month, if that. But now, it was occurring 3 to 4 times a week, which was clearly abnormal. Not only that, her nightmares weren't different and random. They were always the same. She said that the same scary person would always appear in her dreams. When I asked her for details, she explained it to me the best way she could with her limited vocabulary. In her dream, she would be playing in a room by herself with the toy bunny in the late afternoon when a woman appears. Her hair was long, almost reaching down to her hips. She was wearing a white sleeveless nightgown, and she was so thin, her skin so pale as if she'd never stepped foot in the sun. As if that wasn't creepy enough, her face, neck, chest, arms, legs, every area of flesh visible was sliced up with numerous cuts that were all bleeding. The woman would stare at Lisa, slowly raise both hands and put them together in front of her face as if about to pray. Then she would tilt her face down, close her eyes, and in a hushed tone like a whisper, begin to mumble something at incredible speed. Lisa would get extremely scared and run out of the room and out of the apartment, but once outside, the woman would be standing at the end of the hallway, still praying and mumbling something. Lisa would run down the stairs and out of the apartment complex, but again, the woman would be standing across the road in the same position. With the sun about to set, Lisa is unable to ask anyone for help because there isn't a single soul around, not even a passing car. In this dream, my daughter would continue trying to run away from this terrifying woman covered in cuts without any success. According to her, she'd never seen this woman in her life, but she was young and looked like someone who might be in high school. The days went by without any change. One afternoon, I was vacuuming her room and thinking of taking Lisa to see a counselor when I saw her bunny sitting on her bed. It was pretty big, around 30 centimeters, and she always slept with it. I looked at its silly face looking at me. And that's when it clicked that all of this had begun shortly after we received this present. I picked it up from the bed and turned it around. Its back was made so that you could open and close it with Velcro, and I saw one strand of long black hair caught in it. I instantly had a horrible feeling and quickly ripped the Velcro apart. Instead of regular stuffing one might expect to see inside a stuffed animal, it was full of hair. I screamed and ran to get a garbage bag and threw the bunny straight into it. Not wanting it anywhere close to us, I took it straight out and threw it into the bin at the park. I remember washing my hands 3 times when I got back home. Wanting to know what that was all about, I tried reaching out to Sachi a few times after that. When I tried to call, I'd only get a machine voicemail and could never get a hold of her. I even tried to look up the address she gave me, but the address didn't exist. Whose hair was inside that bunny? Who's the girl that kept appearing in Lisa's dreams, and what was she praying towards her? Why did Sachi do this to my daughter? Most of these questions I will never have an answer to, but I do have an idea of what Sachi's motive might have been. Her and her husband did not have children, and it was because she couldn't fall pregnant. They explored IVF, but the doctors told her the possibility of success was very low. I remember Sachi looking at my daughter with kind, hopeful eyes, but there was something darker there too, something that looked like anger or envy. Or maybe that's all in my twisted imagination. I wonder what would have happened if we continued to live with that stuffed bunny in our lives. I told Lisa that it went up to bunny heaven, but she was extremely sad about losing it. And if you were wondering, the answer is yes. Her nightmares stopped, and she also stopped harming herself straight away after that bunny was thrown out. She's now in 1st grade. She has many friends and is enjoying school life, which brings me nothing but relief. There is one thing, though, that makes me worry, and that's the fact that she seems to have a fascination with blades. I was tidying up her desk while she was at school one day when I happened to open one of the drawers. It was full of scissors, box cutters, carving knives, more than 10 of them in total. We're required to buy these things for school, but I also found razor blades that belonged to my husband. I asked Lisa about it when she got home, but all she said was that she took them because she wanted them. For her, it seemed to be a very simple matter. September was her birthday, and she asked for a kitchen knife. For the first time in my life, I slapped her. It's November now as I'm writing this. Christmas is approaching soon, and I'm worried that she's going to ask Santa for some kind of blade. Becoming a popular YouTuber has become a hot pursuit for many people, not only in Japan, but around the world. It was a bit slower to catch on in Japan, and many people used to look at it with a lot of skepticism. However, with famous people beginning to create their own channels and the truth behind exactly how much big YouTubers were earning became common knowledge, it changed the tides. It's also well known that behind every successful YouTuber lies hundreds of accounts that failed to make a name for themselves. I was one of those failures. A few years ago, my friend and I decided to put our all into starting our own channel, but the numbers didn't grow. A channel with 2 mundane men didn't catch anyone's attention. Until one day, something caught my attention. It was a YouTuber who went around admonishing people of not following rules. He went around pointing fingers at people who were smoking just outside the designated smoking areas and those who were littering. This YouTuber would oftentimes get into arguments and other types of trouble by getting in their faces about breaking the rules. It was stressful, and yet I couldn't look away. This was the type of content that even I could do, and the more intense the situation got, the higher the likelihood of it going viral. This was what we needed for our channel, and we were right. I can't say that our channel got huge as a result of it, but it picked up tremendously from before. We frequently got into some kind of trouble with the people we were bothering, but it worked in our favor because we were racking up views. We were a lot more soft-spoken and cautious at the beginning, but as we started getting used to the rhythm of things, we became more bold. I would talk really loud to catch everyone's attention, and I began to purposefully be rude from the get-go to instigate a fight. My friend was filming, so no matter how heated up the situation got, it never amounted to a physical fight. Viewers who left comments always applauded my bravery, and I became a sort of hero that was fixing ill-mannered people. I began thinking that it didn't really matter how I approached the subject because I was only doing the right thing. The views were increasing consistently, and I decided to head out one day to shoot another video. It was in the afternoon of a weekday, so there weren't that many people, but an older man caught my eye. He was smoking outside the smoking area, so I approached him and said, "You shouldn't be smoking here." The man either didn't hear me or he outright ignored me because he didn't reply, so I said louder, "Can you hear me? A grown adult like yourself should be able to follow simple rules. You should be ashamed of yourself." The old man kept his head down and continued to ignore my existence. I felt a pinch of annoyance and frustration and proceeded to say right in his ear, "Please smoke in the smoking area. Please smoke in the smoking area." I repeated that phrase until the man finally reacted. He looked up and brought his face close to mine and says softly, "You're gonna die." Seeing him suddenly move and say those words surprised me, and I stopped talking. The man turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. These things happen all the time. When verbal fights occurred, more often than not, people would threaten me in one way or another before they walked away. But the creepy words this old man said to me stuck with me. We continued to film, and we ended it without much more excitement. The trouble occurred on my way home after I split up with my friend. I was walking along a deserted back street when I noticed a big car like a van pull up behind me. I saw a young guy come out saying, "Excuse me," and then everything went black. When I came to, I think I was inside the car. There was a cloth over my head and I couldn't see anything. I immediately began to panic, and that's when I realized that my hands and feet were also bound. Where am I?" I stuttered. The men's conversation stopped, and one of them said, "You awake? You messed with the wrong person today." I had a sudden flashback of the old man smoking. I said, "What you're doing is illegal. I have it all on video. I'm going to go to the police." "Really? How's a dead person going to tell the police?" All the men began laughing. Shit. It's a bit embarrassing, but I began to cry, and the only thing I could do at this point was to apologize. I did so over and over again. The men only laughed harder the more I cried and said that I was sorry. I don't know how many times I repeated myself and how long I was in that state for. I was overcome with fear that I lost all touch with reality. The car finally came to a stop and the men carried me out. Once they put me down, they took the cloth off of my head, but I had a blindfold on, so I still couldn't see a thing. I was shaking like a leaf and still apologizing. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew something truly evil was in store for me. "Stop moving." I felt a few hands grab me and push me down on my side, pinning me down so that I couldn't move. They pushed my head down to the ground, my ear getting pressed against the hard floor. What the hell were they going to do? I was in a full-blown panic, but I couldn't move at all. Just then, something cold trickled into my other ear. At the same time, I heard crackling noises right in my eardrum and a shooting pain deep inside my ear canal. My body went stiff from the immense pain. I couldn't even scream. "One more time," I heard a man say. And again, I felt something trickle into my ear. Another few crackling noises and the intense pain. The sound was so loud that I thought my veins in my brain might burst. No sound came out of my mouth and I began to twitch involuntarily. "You don't want to die?" the same man asked me. I was covered in tears and snot by this time and shook my head from side to side as much as was feasible, what with my head still being pinned down to the ground. The man continued talking, laying out some conditions, and I nodded continuously to show him that I understood. After a while, I heard the men talking amongst themselves again, and they carried me back to the car. Once inside, the only movement and sound came from myself, shaking uncontrollably, but no one was laughing anymore. I think they drove for less than 10 minutes before the car stopped. They untied my hands and legs and told me to get out, warning me not to uncover my face for at least 5 minutes. I waited 30. I slowly lifted the cloth and looked around. There was just a field in front of me and no one else around. I stood up and with my wobbly legs began to walk, and about 10 minutes later reached the city. I went into the nearest convenience store and ran straight into the bathroom. Once inside, I began crying again and crumbled onto the floor. After somewhat regaining my composure, I looked at myself in the mirror. There was a trace of something red and dry trickling out of my ear. I wiped it off and smelled it. It gave off a kind of sour and pungent smell, and then I realized that it was Tabasco. They had dripped Tabasco into my ear. I opened the tap and began to wash my face when I felt a sharp pain on the back of my head. I felt it and saw blood. Seems they hit me in the back of the head with something too. I cleaned myself up the best I could and hurried back home. I thought about going to the police and to the hospital, but I was too scared to make that move. It was ultimately the correct decision because when I got home, I had a present waiting for me in front of my door. It was a bottle of Tabasco. As soon as I saw that, I decided to run away that night. It's been a while since all that happened, but I never got in touch with the friend I was doing YouTube with. He didn't try to get in touch with me either, which makes me think that maybe he experienced the same thing I did. We obviously deleted our YouTube channel. I dramatized a few parts of this story, but everything is true. There are people in this world that shouldn't be messed with. This story had nothing to do with ghosts, but it's the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me. A young woman went to Hawaii once. She met a man named Harry while she was there, and they quickly fell in love and had a whirlwind romance. When it came time to fly back to Japan, he went with her to the airport, hugged her tenderly, and gave her a little jewelry box. "I want you to open it once you're on the plane," he said. He stayed with her until she had to walk through the gates and, with a promise that they will see each other again soon, they said their goodbyes. When the plane took off, she took out the little box and looked at it. Her heart skipped a beat from excitement. But once she opened it, there was just a piece of paper inside. When she opened it up, it read, "Welcome to the world of AIDS." This one is a pretty famous urban legend that I'm sure a lot of you have heard of before. But let me tell you about a real experience I had that might make you reevaluate your actions. A year or so ago, I went to a brothel for the first time in my life. The woman there told me the following. This brothel is a pretty famous one in the Kanto region of Japan, and they're well known to offer a full service for a decent price, and the women there are also really beautiful. Once there, I did what I had to do and used the remaining time to just talk to her. The conversation went in the direction of her experience with other men and whether she had anything scary or weird happen. She said, "Promise you'll keep this a secret." A friend of mine who works in a different brothel got AIDS from one of her customers. Her customer looked like a geek, was in his 40s, and just looked dirty and unhygienic. The man was self-aware and offered to pay her extra, saying it must be tough to do it with someone like him, even if it's her job to do so. When he went out of his way to do that for her, she felt that he was a kind man, and they proceeded to have a fun time together. When he left, she opened up the brown envelope with the cash inside. He had paid her 30,000 yen, or $200, and there were 2 other pieces of paper inside. The first one was a handwritten receipt that had the brothel price of 10,000 yen, plus his added 10,000 yen tip with a note that said, "I'll buy you for a higher price." She laughed a bit at the weird comment. She then looked at the second piece of paper and she almost fainted. It was a positive test result for HIV. I didn't know how to respond to this story. I've always been an empathetic person, so I proceeded to tell her that getting AIDS isn't a death sentence anymore in today's world, as long as her friend takes medication. I told her that her friend should look on the bright side and live life to its fullest, and any other advice I could think of. After a while, the girl began to cry. She said, "I can't lie to someone as kind as you." "What do you mean?" I asked. She said in between her sobs, What I just told you, it didn't happen to a friend of mine. It actually happened to me." I got tested and luckily it came back negative. I called the brothel after the fact, but the girl wasn't working there anymore. But if any of you have heard of NK, it's dangerous around there. If you've ever been in that area, I recommend you to go get tested straight away.